Welcome to our workshop today. We are doing a culinary twist during the COVID, so we thought that maybe from our experience you could learn from what we did and help kids in the future learn in a different way if need be. I'm Dottie Record with the Wapato School District, and I have been teaching for 26 years. This comes around, and in the alternative setting and in my own kitchen, which we are filming from. So my partner in crime is...
Hi, I'm Maddy Whitehurst, and I will be teaching my 4th year at Wapato High School in the culinary at the high school. So we are excited to show you what we've been working on this year. It's been a challenge, and Dottie and I have been brainstorming how we can still meet those power standards with the limited amount of individualized things that we have to do.
So before we get started, we want to recognize
we would like to acknowledge that we are coming to you from the traditional lands of the first people of our valley, the 14 Confederate tribes and bands of the Yakima Nation. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Yakima Nation.
our challenges with the two of us. When the semester was coming around to the new semester, we were challenged by the district to get kits into our kids' hands, something for them to actually cook at home, because we didn't know at that time if we were going to be going hybrid or what things were. So we contacted each other and decided that we needed to do some brainstorming, come up with some ideas. So as we were doing the work and getting things coordinated, the health department came into the mix, and the plan to roll into hybrid was also being talked about. So let's go over some of the things that we came up against as we were planning and rolling through.
So some of the things we came up against were individualized labs and lessons. So normally we do groups of 4, a lot of group work. I'm sure most of the culinary teachers do the same thing. So we had to have individualized equipment, individualized personal items, aprons, all of that kind of stuff. So we created recipes that you can be done in a mug. So we bought all the students individualized mugs so that we could do different things. We also did a kit that they can do. It's Muddy Buddies, individualized serving size of Muddy Buddies. So that was pretty fun for the students to get to do as well.
So when we developed our kits, some of the things that we were able to purchase for the kids was the cup, and they all got their own liquid measuring cup and their own measuring sets. So in hindsight, the only thing differently that I would do with these would provide a little higher quality measuring, because even with my bifocals working, it's hard for the kids to see what size, but it did teach the kids that they had to look at the size of the cup itself to identify your 1/4 and 1/3 of a cup, and the same way with the teaspoon. So the learning process was really there on understanding all the measurements. And we gave them each one of these kits. As you can see, the names were put on the outside. So instead of them going to a lab setting, getting out their equipment, they went to the station in the classroom where their bags were stored. And so they got out, they got their trays, and they set up their equipment that they were going to need for the particular recipe. Okay, kind of the way after we did the planning, we started and we put together a culinary Google Doc lesson planning sheet that had both our schedules kind of, and which was, we didn't have the same schedule, but we were online to start with, and so we we instilled that what schools, and then when we did go into hybrid, the lesson plans were right there. We both had rights to them. We may not have stayed on the same day, but we continued through the planning. So what we were trying to do is assess the kids' skills from what they had got from their first semester, what we had to reteach, which was a lot. So we spent a lot of time reteaching. So some of our skills and some of our lessons seem really, really basic, but there were some culinary standards that we really wanted to hit on, and the food safety. And as you can see here, that we do the serve safe, and this year wasn't a total requirement that all kids took it. I encouraged my kids to take it and send me a screenshot if they're past it, and several of them went ahead and did that.
Since we had a mashup of students and kind of different learning levels, and also we had students for the first time that hadn't had culinary first semester, we started back and we kind of just basically retaught a first semester of culinary. And so mise en place is really important, having everything in place so they know what they're doing, being able to measure. That's something we started focusing on right away with the tray.
And one of the first lessons we did, and several of our lessons have like mini quizzes below them, and so it taught them, the kids had to, my kids, after they got their kit and their tray, they had to select what cooking equipment that they needed, what out of their kit that they needed, absolutely. How many times they were gonna have to use the teaspoon or the tablespoon, what containers that they might need in addition to as a holding area for different on that one. And then they had to show me their mini pods before they did anything else. And then on this one, of course, they did a measuring quiz at the end that they could either do in the online or in person. Okay, together we were going to kind of show you what we expected of the kids. In the beginning of our labs, we actually divided things out for the kids because that's what the health department, later on when rules started relaxing a little bit in our county, the kids were allowed to get it out of a common container, as long as they had rubber gloves on. In this recipe, the kids had to come up with what the measuring equipment. So they would look through, and of course you're going to look at this as this is one of their first labs, and all they've done is paperwork online, and they had to figure out which one of these was the 1/4 of a cup. That took a lot of thought process for my kids, and all kids, because this is foreign. This doesn't look like a piece of paper in a worksheet. So they had to pick out which one they were going to need and set that aside. Were they going to need the liquid measuring cup? Yes or no? And it went to that side. So they picked out, what are you not going to need? And so they set those on the other side. And then the troubleshooting, I said, okay, are you going to have more things to measure than what's with the 1/4 of a cup? Where are you going to put what's in here? What can you use as a holding container? We wanted them to use their creative thinking skills to utilize what they had. Because if you're in an apartment all alone or in college dorm room and you're trying to do this, you're going to have to utilize what you have available. So we were going with the creative thinking aspect.
Okay, so then we focused on the proper techniques for how to measure flour and sugar and everything. So they had to get a spoon and a knife. Hopefully you would have that in your kitchen. And also a spoon so you can mix everything together in the mug. So like Dottie had said, we were using limited resources. We would have them measure out the flour. So the flour was a 1/4 a cup, so they found their 1/4 cup. They had to have it in some kind of container like this that wasn't measured out, and then they actually had to measure it out. So they would scoop it and use the knife to properly level it too. And then what we would have them do is add it right into the mug so that they can make their product. and they could make a mess on their tray or whatever. It was kind of okay. Limited resources. Did what we could. So then they put it right into the mug like that, and then they would go to the next ingredient and continue to measure until they had it all in there.
And in a way, with the kids doing it one-on-one, learning what they had to do, they knew that the end results was something they were going to be able to eat. And so if they messed up their product, it didn't affect all their kids' products. So I tried to instill into them the quality of the product that they were making needed to be to their standard and to my standards and to the safety standards of the district.
So the liquid measure cups that we got were really hard to see. They had a really hard time seeing the marks. We had to write a mark on there. So they didn't really understand where a fourth a cup was, but for this they needed a fourth a cup of water, which would be the lowest one on there. So they would go to the sink, they'd fill it up. After they filled it up, and we showed them to get down and get level with the liquid cup.
And as you can see on this cup, whatever we were doing, they needed this amount, and it's in between. So I put a red line with a Sharpie on it. Some of the kids went ahead and did all of their lines with the Sharpie when they had time, so it was easier to see. I thought that was a really showing their initiative that made their lives a little easier. So those were some of the things we learned about what we bought, trying to save money and so that we could get more. And in this lab, we tried to instill in them the kitchen safety, food safety, the ability to understanding the measurements. And so we were hitting some of the proficiency standards that we had set, competency standards that we had set for ourselves. Understanding that a brownie is a quick bread, that was a little bit of a touch of why is it in a cookie versus the conversation. And in the end of this lab, several of my kids were standing around and, tasting it, sampling it and going, They were wanting to know why there was no egg in it. And I said, well, what do you think? And so we were going to that level that I don't think that a lot of my kids get to when we actually do labs in the classroom, because we don't have time. These take less time, so you have more time to discuss the interaction of the equipment or the ingredients and that type of stuff. So the kids are actually learning more content along the way that you tried to get them to read about and they may not have. So that's the teachable moments that we were hitting on that sometimes you don't get to in culinary labs.
Okay, so I've mixed up all the ingredients, and then you just start with it says fork, but I used a spoon, time constraints. So after it's all stirred up, you can see it in the mug. Everything's, it's as good as it's gonna get. They put the spoon down and you put it right into the microwave. And this recipe says 1 minute and 40 seconds. So we had them put it in. I also had them use a paper towel to cover it in case it explodes. You can never know with the microwave. So I had them cover it, and then we put, again, all microwaves are different, so that'll go for 1 minute, and then we'll try to figure out how to add 40 seconds. We'll check it.
And the hardest thing with these kids is the carryover cooking, is them understanding that when their product comes out of the microwave, there's a carryover cooking, so they keep going to you and saying, this looks like it's not done. You have to wait time for the carryover cooking, or it's not gonna look done. Because we need roughly, well, by the time you do the inserts and some kids work.
So I put it in for 1 minute, and it's still a little doughy, so I would have them put it in for another 30 to 40 seconds, depending on the microwave. And trying to explain to them that all microwaves are different and that it's really a suggested time is hard for them to understand too. They think exactly that time is what they should.
And my lab has 3 different microwaves, and all of them are a different wattage. And I think the high school is all, they bought them all at the same time. Mine have been rotated in and out over the years of, and the one we're using is a brand new one. It was bought right before pandemic, and it's been in the back room, and we just dug it out because of all the microwave labs. And that's why I'm not quite as proficient with it.
And this one, since it's the newer one, it looks like 1:30 was good. So we had to tell them to check it, so they can be diligent about that. So there it is. You can see that it's done, and it looks like a brownie in the mug. And then they could just eat it right out of here.
Oh, they have to have their Cool Whip.
And you could, after it's cooled, they added a little bit of Cool Whip on top. So they really, really liked that. They thought it was fun.
The other thing we emphasized in this whole thing was the kids' knife skills, how they handled their knives. And one of our first labs was we made the homemade Play-Doh which we didn't really concentrate on safety skills or cross-contamination type stuff because of they weren't going to eat it. So the kids kind of had a fun lab, and we made the Play-Doh, and then we sent them all home with plastic knives to practice, and they were to send us videos. By the next time we did a hot apple pie in a mug or a cup recipe where they had to take the apple. We had shown them a video on the proper way to do the apple. You want to guess out there in Cyberland how many of them actually had watched the video? So we demoed again before the class, and then we put together. But the safety standards in culinary are all about knives and their skills. So even in, we are only doing single serving, they still have to follow all the safety precautions of handling a knife, holding the knife, using the guards safely, knowing how to clean them. So we didn't drop our standards by doing single serving recipes. I think we upped the standards of the quality of the kids' work by doing this because they had to do it. In a group of 4, it's always one kid, and the one that either likes to do the chopping or the knife is better at it, gets to do it. It doesn't usually rotate because you don't have time to keep track of who's done at what time. But, you know, so single serving, they had to do it by themselves. When you have 12 to 14 kids handling knives, it gets a little nerve-wracking, and trying to keep them at the 6-foot distancing, it was interesting. And these tables are not designed to, you know, they're not counter heights. And that was one thing I would like to change if we have to stay this way, is counter some higher tables so the kids use them at counter heights for the safety reasons. So, but the kids learned about all the knives, and this is the kit that they are using in our culinary labs, and they know that they have to keep them when we are in labs. They have to keep them away from all the food so they stay nice and clean. So those are some of the standards and the proficiencies that we added in to the mug recipes.
Yeah, and then in the high school, our labs, we had to get rid of all the table height labs like Dottie was saying. But in our kitchens, we had a little more counter space than she did. So my students were actually able to do it at counter height. I think I would agree with her. If you're doing it lower, it's a little hard to cut on the lower tables. So that was definitely a challenge this year. So thank you for watching our video for a culinary twist for this crazy twisty school year we had.
But we hope that by watching this, you have picked up one idea that you could run with. The master schedule for the high school is out. My colleague is not getting to teach culinary, but I will be teaching culinary next year, and I am going to use this probably for the first month and a half so that my kids have those basic skills. I saw more skill development by them doing it one-on-one than working in teams, because they had to rely on themselves and they had more confidence in what they were making. So for the first, whatever, until I feel that they have the confidence to work in a group, I'm going to use this method of teaching my beginning culinary kids. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy this.